There are religions that are as rigid as the shaft of a lance. They demand blind, unquestioning compliance. They spread their hierarchy to all fields of human action. These religions resist change of any sort. They were laid down by men who wanted to make sure that those who followed would forever remain in a spiritual prison.
This is going to hurt a lot of feelings, but it needs to be said. The government is not afraid of you, and that means you civilians. The only civilians our occupied government concerns itself with are those few individuals that understand structure, leadership, commitment, fraternity, and bravery. The characteristics of a warrior do not necessarily mean conventional weapons. A civilian information technology expert that uses his skills and dedication to his country is indistinguishable from U.S. Air Force personnel that sit behind a desk and do the same thing. Such men are a deadly component of the whole, but this is only so long as the individual shows a military level of dedication and either works effectively alone or acts within his place in a committed hierarchical brotherhood of nationalists. It is necessary here that it is understood that the man with the gun does not mean the powers that be have a revolutionary threat on their hands. Most people do not use their firearm and will not use them. A civilian writer is infinitely more deadly with a keyboard than an uncommitted civilian who will turn his back on his countrymen or is incapable of following orders, regardless of his arsenal. I have said that if a U.S. Navy aircraft carrier crashed on a deserted island, they could exist indefinitely. They have all the skills to build a society at their disposal and a chain of command in place to make it happen. Whereas, like so many books of both fact and fiction that feature stories of stranded groups of civilians, they can't figure out how to stop fighting and argue over who should be in charge. While in U.S. Navy basic training, it was conveyed to us that in a state of emergency, if something happened to the leadership, we could carry it on down. If the chief petty officer has fallen, we go to the highest ranking petty officer. If he's out, we keep going down the line, even if it means our highest ranking leader is a road guard. Many civilians do not understand this, and for those who do, I do not consider them mere civilians, but soldiers within the ranks of our foreseeable and imperative revolution. The threat of a military organization and a military-minded person, regardless of whether or not they have served for any length of time, is that they understand the concept of folk. This is a German word meaning nation, people, and it is not race-specific. The military mind, the folkish mind, is the threat. For the record, a folk is defined by cultural, ethical, and moral specifics, and can even be defined by spiritual or religious preferences. Right now, our occupied government, which was never our government to begin with, is keeping a watchful eye on veterans. They are literally saying that the veterans that served them are now a threat. When I told some civilians that were rife for revolution that the problem is going to be civilians not following orders as military-minded men do, they said, no, following orders is the problem. Wrong. The problems we see in the military are a product of not exercising the courage and liberty to not follow unlawful orders. When it comes down to the very lawful and necessary need to defend one's country from a domestic nemesis, I sense that civilians will balk. If you are an authentic nationalist making excellent counter-propaganda against your enemy, when you tell your readers to blast your articles, videos, or radio interviews out across the internet, they either do it without question, or they reveal their common weakness. Whereas the previously mentioned civilians will ask why, or they won't do it at all. In the most pathetic scenario, and in a divinely disgusting show of their liberal individualism, they might go complain to other useless eaters, that you're too commanding. Revolution isn't democracy. You are not a sovereign because you say so. Just as the word recruit means retard every time your Army drill sergeant or Navy recruit division commander calls you by that title, in the military you come to understand that the word civilian means a lazy, servile drone standing in line at a Burger King complaining that he has to get his widescreen TV fixed. These words are almost verbatim from a U.S. Navy chaplain. In this, I must distinguish that a citizen is not the civilian that we are here describing. A citizen is a nationalist. He's the guy with the American flag window sticker made in China who toes the party line when his transparent leaders ask him to. The nationalist puts his nation first, which means he is putting the people first. And when the state becomes separate from the people, he is on the front lines of the revolution to tear it down. Within monarchy, my preferred brand of government, the nobility is the state. The state is indistinguishable from the people. The state is the blood. Furthermore, a nationalist may be a follower or a leader, but he is never a joiner. Joiners do not have a concept of self or system, and thus they are led like sheep to the slaughter. The nationalist is a threat. The citizen is a threat. He is not in the street making feudal demands. He is employing all the tools at his disposal to bring about revolution. In this, I will repeat once again, the threat is not in the street. Street actions are ineffective against the enemy and only productive in giving people a sense that something big and wonderful is taking place in their corner of the ring. If a person was actually standing next to me at one of the few street actions I have participated in, they would be witness to how utterly futile and time-wasting such actions are. But let me digress. Street actions are effective when they are done in the form of rigidly organized rallies. This is what Marcus Garvey was doing. And you want men who can march perfectly in step and are dressed uniformly. That brings fear to the enemy. Civilians need to express themselves and couldn't march in step to save their lives. They bring no fear to the enemy, as they are nothing but a disorganized mob. More on this later. Street actions which are not rigidly structured, uniformed, and disciplined rallies admittedly still look good on camera. It does look pretty good to see a guy waving a protest sign and yelling a bunch of nonsense through a bullhorn. But we're not trying to recruit more of the same. We need people to apply themselves in effective action that has measurable and proven results. Apart from the militant rally, which is usually called fascist by our detractors, and if they want to call us fascists, fine, we're fascists. But apart from the disciplined and razor-sharp rally, what is effective is readily accessible counter-propaganda, which is what the internet is for. We need people that are interested in perfecting that craft or patiently learning the intricacies of psychological warfare. If they are not a present student and future leader, then they must be accessible as useful assets, nationalists, citizens, or resign themselves to admitting that they are masochistic civilians in it for the thrill and the drama and lack the fortitude for the fight. We need people who understand brotherhood, fraternity, loyalty, honor, and the necessity for military organization and discipline. I sense that most people do not care about the facts. In the face of the reality of what they must commit to be effective, they are soft. We are not interested in backstabbers, crybabies, or traitors, nor will we tolerate them amongst our ranks. This isn't an episode of Friends, in which kissing and making up is the best move. Traitors will be shunned. We are in the middle of a war zone, a kind of war where it is so slow and methodical, people can't even conceptualize that they are enemy combatants in the eyes of our overlords, even if they are just Joe Citizen. Our minds, so too, like the health of our bodies, are potential weapons that must be destroyed in the eyes of these vermin. We are citizens of our nations, and this message is fit for any revolutionary nation, whether it is defined by race, religion, culture, or all three. And whether it is African, European, American Indian, Chinese, or something else. The true revolutionaries of whatever nation they propose and are committed to are not interested in saving America as far as the government of the United States of America is concerned. We are interested in protecting our folk and forming new government for that purpose. Revolution does not mean you go back to the same tired, hypocritical, and flawed system. Since when has the word revolution meant putting the same thing in place? We must also be clear that revolution doesn't have to mean violence, but it also doesn't mean a protest sign, bullhorn, or telling criminals what they already know, that they're criminals. Make no mistake, revolution in America does not simply rest on the amount of firearms in the United States. Revolution can be virtually bloodless, and there have been genuine revolutions that hardly shed a single drop of blood. But keep in mind that they weren't done with protest signs. It was neither semi-automatic carbines nor cardboard signs that brought such revolutions into being, but the character of the citizens of the formative nation that brought it into being. The threat is not our weapons, but the character of the men and women who are the backbone of the nationalist revolution. To be frank, it is hardly possible to do anything about the scum on a military level. Not because they are so powerful, but because it takes too long to motivate the drones around us. If people were militarily trained and could be commanded at a moment's notice to take action, we might have hope. However, people do not follow orders, do not understand virtue, they fear death, they are pacifists, cowardly, petty, and infantile. In short, you can't command civilians to do anything. The militias are also a joke at this stage. Their organization is paltry, discipline lacking, and they are just as cowardly as the rest of the gutless civilians. Waco is just one example among many in which the militia was nowhere to be found. Dozens of children were attacked by the U.S. government with automatic weapons and military-grade gas. Where was the militia? There have been others who have commanded veteran militiamen and made calls for authentic revolution, and no one shows up on the designated day. The militia is just as much of a joke today to puppeteered military regulars as they were to British regulars during the Revolutionary War. It took more than wishful thinking and armchair revolutionaries regurgitating the words, "From my cold dead hands," to crush British rule. Courage, like marksmanship, can be taught to a man, but in many cases you have to drill it into his head over and over again. This doesn't happen overnight, and we're not yet seeing the kind of preparations we need to expedite the process. This isn't a cry to give up on training for a potential violent confrontation. You need to train for such situations. But it does answer why some leaders sell out. It isn't because they are evil or even cowardly, necessarily. It is because they end up seeing that the people who claim to be as concerned as they are gutless and incapable of working as a cohesive unit. The game is therefore rigged against the leader. Then there are those who have something horrible in their past, and they come to understand that their own people would burn them at the stake. Instead of manning up, the children, and most people are children, wait for a daddy figure in shining armor who has a flawless record and will do all the fighting for them. Yet we tend to find that these shining saviors either never show up or they are quickly exterminated, and the whole movement falls apart because it's comprised of gutless, undisciplined civilians that don't understand the necessity of a chain of command. Do you remember my statements about carrying the leadership down, even if it comes down to a road guard? And lastly, if the Savior shows up bright and shining, half the time he's bought and paid for. For the record, I'm not interested in selling out, and I'm also not a masochist. We will progressively and viciously shun the time wasters, do-nothings, and assorted cowards. Doing something doesn't have to mean violent action either. There are numerous solutions to the problems we face. Most people do not, however, want to solve these issues. I sense they are merely addicted to the excitement of the pseudo-revolution, of truth-seeking. In the movie Fight Club, there is a very special reason why our hero forced people to stand outside and go through a kind of hazing to join his revolutionary organization. It is to weed out those who claim to want a solution from those who actually fight for one. It is also to make clear that what is happening isn't a democracy. No revolution has ever been democratic or liberal, even if that is what the end claims to want to manifest. In revolution, you use military dictatorship to get something done. And yet United States Americanism rejects the authoritarian rule of fascism, National Socialism, and monarchism. So you have a military regimented revolution that brings about the revolution, and then once it's brought about, these incompetent morons decide to go back to something idiotic like liberalism, democracy, communism, etc., in which the mob rules. And the mob is so incompetent, they can't do anything because the majority is always flawed in its decision-making because the majority is not qualified to make any decisions. Therefore, it goes back to military rule. It should stay at military rule. Monarchy, fascism, National Socialism, take your pick. Americans live under the illusion that they will be able to retain their individuality and democratic, whining personality while affecting change. Nothing will ever happen under that mindset if they do not understand that they must submit themselves to military regimentation, military commitment, and a soldierly level of courage. They will continue to be slaves. I have found that the only people who have stuck by me when it comes to actually getting things done are either former military personnel or women. And it is pathetic that I have more dedicated female supporters than male. I sense that the women, by their very nature, understand the need for hierarchy, just as they understand that the person who is actually going to get something done is the one who demonstrates his willingness to put everything on the line. Who is the threat? If you're such a person, then it is you that is the threat.
Phantoms lured me off my